Breaking now in the Russia-Ukraine war. Dramatic reports from the Frontline suggest Vladimir Putin's battlefield strategy is facing one of its most serious tests yet. Ukrainian forces are pressing hard, Russian units are retreating under pressure, and what once looked like a frozen front is suddenly showing signs of collapse. Tonight, we break down how Ukraine is driving Russia's army into a deepening military and political crisis. Ukraine's battlefield momentum is becoming increasingly visible as its forces press forward across several critical sectors of the front line, signaling a shift that is drawing intense attention from military analysts and political observers alike. What was once a grinding, static conflict is now showing signs of rapid movement as Ukrainian units exploit vulnerabilities that Russian forces are struggling to contain. This surge is not accidental, nor is it limited to a single area. It reflects a broader operational push designed to stretch Russian defenses and force difficult decisions under pressure. One of the most striking developments is the steady collapse of Russian defensive lines that were previously considered heavily fortified. Ukrainian troops are advancing through positions that Moscow invested months of manpower and resources to build, suggesting that these defenses are no longer sustainable under sustained assault. Precision strikes on supply depots and command nodes are creating gaps that frontline units cannot quickly repair, leaving Russian forces exposed and increasingly reactive rather than in control. Here's the key question shaping the battlefield right now. Can Russia stop the momentum before it turns into a full-scale retreat? Ukrainian forces appear to be moving with calculated speed, advancing just enough to maintain pressure while avoiding overextension. This approach is forcing Russian commanders into a defensive posture, often retreating to avoid encirclement rather than risking catastrophic losses. Each withdrawal, however small, compounds the strain on already stretched resources and morale. Equally significant is the psychological impact of these advances. Ukrainian troops are reportedly operating with rising confidence, reinforced by recent successes and a growing belief that Russian positions can be broken. On the other side, Russian soldiers face mounting uncertainty as orders shift and lines become harder to hold. The battlefield narrative is changing, and in warfare, perception can be as powerful as firepower. What makes this moment especially critical is the cumulative effect of these advances. Taken individually, each push might seem limited, but together they form a pattern of sustained pressure that Russia is finding difficult to counter. Ukrainian forces are dictating the tempo of engagement, choosing when and where to strike, while Russian units are left responding to events rather than shaping them. If this trajectory continues, the strategic implications could extend far beyond the immediate front, redefining control and influence across the conflict zone. The strain on Russia's military is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, as reports from the front suggest a force stretched thin by prolonged combat, limited resources, and declining cohesion. What began as an effort to project strength now appears burdened by structural weaknesses that are surfacing under sustained Ukrainian pressure. The question many analysts are now asking is not whether these problems exist, but how long Russian forces can continue operating effectively under such conditions. Manpower shortages are at the center of this crisis. Russian units are reportedly operating below authorized strength, with replacement troops often arriving with limited training and minimal combat readiness. These gaps are not easily filled, and the resulting imbalance forces commanders to hold extended defensive lines with fewer soldiers than required. This creates vulnerabilities that Ukraine is actively seeking to exploit, increasing the pressure on units already struggling to maintain discipline and operational effectiveness. Logistics, the backbone of any military campaign, are also showing signs of serious stress. Supply routes are under constant threat, equipment maintenance is lagging, and frontline troops are facing shortages of essential material. When ammunition deliveries slow or vehicles break down without timely repair, the ability to respond to fast-moving battlefield developments is sharply reduced. The ripple effect is immediate, leaving units isolated and increasingly dependent on improvisation rather than planning. Here's the critical hook: a strained army doesn't just fight worse. It thinks slower. Command and control challenges are reportedly compounding these problems, as disrupted communications and shifting orders create confusion at multiple levels. This uncertainty erodes confidence among troops and limits the ability of commanders to coordinate effective countermeasures. In modern warfare, hesitation can be decisive, and Russia's ability to act decisively appears increasingly compromised. Morale is another factor weighing heavily on the battlefield. Prolonged deployments, mounting casualties, and unclear strategic objectives are taking a psychological toll on soldiers. Reports of fatigue and frustration are becoming more frequent, and such conditions inevitably affect performance under fire. When morale falters, defensive positions become harder to hold, and the risk of further withdrawals increases. Taken together, these pressures paint a picture of a military under severe strain, forced to defend broad front lines while grappling with internal challenges that weaken its overall capacity. As Ukraine continues to apply sustained pressure, the resilience of Russia's army is being tested in ways that could shape the next phase of the conflict. Ukraine's evolving battlefield tactics are increasingly redefining how the war is being fought, signaling a shift from attritional defense to precision-driven disruption. What is drawing particular attention is not just the use of advanced technology, but the way these tools are being integrated into a coherent operational strategy. The battlefield is no longer shaped solely by troop numbers or heavy armor. It is being influenced by speed, intelligence, and precision in ways that are placing Russian forces under constant strain. At the center of this transformation is the expanded use of drone warfare. Ukrainian forces are deploying reconnaissance drones to monitor enemy movements in near real time, feeding targeting data directly to artillery and missile units. This tight loop between surveillance and strike capability reduces reaction time and leaves little room for Russian units to reposition safely. The result is a battlefield where static defenses quickly become liabilities rather than assets. Here's the hook raising alarms in military circles. How do you defend against an enemy that sees everything? Precision artillery strikes are amplifying this advantage, allowing Ukraine to hit supply depots, fuel storage sites, and command posts with increasing accuracy. These strikes do not need to destroy entire formations to be effective. Disrupting logistics and leadership creates cascading effects that weaken frontline units over time. Even limited strikes can force Russian commanders to divert resources away from offensive operations and into damage control. Rapid maneuver tactics are further compounding these challenges. Ukrainian units are increasingly using flexible, small-scale advances to probe defenses, identify weak points, and exploit them before reinforcements can arrive. This approach avoids large, costly assaults while maintaining continuous pressure. Russian forces, accustomed to more predictable patterns of engagement, are being forced into a reactive stance, often responding too late to shifting threats. Another critical element is the integration of battlefield intelligence from Western partners. Enhanced situational awareness allows Ukrainian commanders to plan operations with greater confidence and precision. When intelligence, drones, and artillery operate as a unified system, the margin for error narrows dramatically for the opposing side. Every movement risks detection. Every supply convoy becomes a potential target. The broader implication is clear and unsettling for Moscow, and Ukraine is not merely matching Russian capabilities, it is adapting faster. The combination of technology, coordination, and tactical flexibility is changing the tempo of the conflict. As these methods continue to evolve, the battlefield itself becomes a force multiplier, favoring those who can think, move, and strike first. The political pressure building inside the Kremlin is intensifying as battlefield setbacks increasingly collide with domestic realities that are harder to control or conceal. What once could be framed as limited tactical adjustments is now feeding a broader narrative of uncertainty, raising uncomfortable questions about leadership, accountability, and the long-term cost of the war. The central hook emerging in Moscow's power circles is this: how long can political stability be maintained when military momentum appears to be slipping? Each retreat on the battlefield carries consequences far beyond lost territory. For President Vladimir Putin, military performance is closely tied to his image of authority and strategic competence. As reports of withdrawals, casualties, and stalled operations circulate, the gap between official messaging and lived experience grows wider. State media can shape narratives, but it cannot fully silence the concerns of families facing repeated mobilizations or the economic strain of a prolonged conflict. Economic pressure is quietly amplifying this political challenge. Sanctions, defense spending, and labor shortages linked to mobilization are placing sustained stress on the Russian economy. While the system has proven resilient, cracks are forming in key sectors, and regional governments are struggling to balance local needs with federal demands. The political hook here is clear. Wars are not only fought on the front lines, they are paid for at home, and that bill is steadily rising. Another layer of pressure comes from within Russia's elite circles. Military setbacks can fuel behind the scenes tension among political leaders, security officials, and regional power brokers. When outcomes fall short of expectations, blame becomes a strategic currency. Analysts suggest that disagreements over strategy, resources, and messaging may be intensifying, even if they remain largely invisible to the public. History shows that internal friction often grows during prolonged conflicts, especially when clear victories remain elusive. Public sentiment, while tightly managed, is also evolving. Initial support rooted in nationalism and security concerns can erode over time when sacrifices mount and clarity diminishes. Reports of casualties, shortages, and inconsistent objectives contribute to a sense of fatigue that no amount of rhetoric can fully erase. The question now facing the Kremlin is not whether dissent exists, but how effectively it can be contained as pressures accumulate. Together, these dynamics are transforming military setbacks into political liabilities. Each battlefield development feeds a larger test of governance, credibility, and endurance. As Ukraine maintains pressure, the political consequences inside Russia may prove just as consequential as the fighting itself. Western support has become a decisive force shaping Ukraine's position on the battlefield, transforming its ability to sustain pressure and adapt to an evolving conflict. What began as emergency assistance has matured into a structured flow of military aid, intelligence sharing, and training that is increasingly integrated into Ukraine's operational planning. The hook driving strategic debate is clear. How much difference can external support make when applied consistently and with precision? Modern weapons systems supplied by Western allies are expanding Ukraine's reach and effectiveness. Advanced air defense, long-range artillery, and precision-guided munitions are enabling Ukrainian forces to challenge Russian advantages and protect critical infrastructure. These capabilities are not merely additive, they fundamentally change how Ukraine fights, allowing commanders to strike deeper, defend more effectively, and manage resources with greater efficiency. Each delivery alters the battlefield calculus, forcing Russia to reassess both offensive and defensive options. Intelligence sharing is another powerful multiplier. Real-time satellite imagery signals intelligence and analytical support are enhancing situational awareness across the front. This information allows Ukrainian planners to anticipate movements, identify vulnerabilities, and minimize surprise. Here's the strategic hook. When one side sees the battlefield more clearly, it controls the tempo of the war. The ability to act on accurate intelligence reduces risk and increases the effectiveness of every operation, from targeted strikes to defensive preparations. Training and operational guidance provided by Western partners are also reshaping Ukraine's military culture. Ukrainian forces are increasingly adopting NATO-style coordination, emphasizing flexibility, decentralized decision-making, and rapid adaptation. These methods improve responsiveness under pressure and allow units to exploit fleeting opportunities. Over time, this shift strengthens cohesion and confidence, qualities that are critical in high-intensity warfare. Equally important is the political signal embedded in continued Western support. Sustained assistance reinforces Ukraine's strategic credibility and sends a message of long-term commitment. For Moscow, this unity complicates planning and undermines expectations that external backing might weaken. For Kyiv, it bolsters morale and reinforces the belief that perseverance is matched by partnership. The cumulative impact of this support extends beyond immediate tactical gains. It is shaping Ukraine into a more capable, resilient force able to absorb losses, adapt quickly, and maintain pressure over time. As Western backing remains steady, Ukraine's leverage on the battlefield continues to grow, redefining what is possible in a conflict once marked by imbalance. The possibility that the war is approaching a decisive turning point is gaining traction as current battlefield trends begin to converge. Analysts are closely watching a combination of sustained Ukrainian advances, mounting Russian strain, and shifting strategic dynamics that together suggest the conflict may be entering a new phase. The central hook shaping global attention is simple but powerful. If momentum continues in this direction, the strategic balance of the war could change faster than many expected. What makes this moment particularly significant is the compounding nature of recent developments. Ukrainian forces are not relying on a single breakthrough, but applying pressure across multiple axes, limiting Russia's ability to concentrate resources or mount effective counteroffensives. Each localized success forces difficult trade-offs, weakening other sectors of the front. Over time, this creates a cascading effect that can transform tactical gains into strategic advantage. Another factor intensifying speculation about a turning point is the erosion of Russia's capacity to recover quickly from setbacks. In earlier phases of the war, losses could be offset by redeployment escalations. Now, constraints on manpower, equipment, and logistics are reducing that flexibility. Here's the hook commanding attention in military circles. When an army loses its ability to reset, even small defeats can accumulate into systemic failure. International dynamics are also reinforcing this shift. Continued Western backing for Ukraine, combined with diplomatic isolation and economic pressure on Russia, is shaping long-term expectations. The war is no longer viewed solely through the lens of immediate battlefield outcomes, but as a contest of endurance, adaptability, and political will. In this context, momentum carries psychological weight, influencing decisions in capitals as much as movements on the ground. The information space adds another layer to this evolving picture. Perceptions of success or failure can drive morale, recruitment, and international support. As narratives of Ukrainian resilience and Russian vulnerability gain visibility, they can influence strategic calculations on both sides. The power of perception becomes a force in itself, amplifying the impact of events on the battlefield. Taken together, these elements point to a moment of heightened consequence. Whether this phase solidifies into a decisive shift will depend on how effectively momentum is sustained and countered. What is clear is that the trajectory of the conflict is no longer static, and the decisions made now could shape the war's outcome in profound and lasting ways. As fighting intensifies, one message is becoming clear: Putin's front line is under strain, and Ukraine is seizing the opportunity to reshape the war. The coming weeks could prove decisive, not only for control of territory, but for the future direction of the conflict itself. We will continue to follow every development as this crisis unfolds.